Google announced last quarter that they had, for the first time ever, a decrease in search traffic.
Observability in traditional software is a mess. It's garbage usually. The log is like the old grandpa of like the telemetry signal, and they're usually hot garbage.
Oh yeah, sorry, we call it hallucinating.
It's a nicer word than lying.
They ruled that candidate error had to like honor what the AI agent said, even though the policies were completely made up.
So we've been talking a lot about the developer experience. We've been talking about the human experience. And I want to talk a little bit about the intersection of humans and machines, that where agents kind of come into play. And I want to start thinking about, how is this different than building traditional software? What is necessary for you to be able to take the guardrails, not completely off, but enough so that the agent can work autonomously and kind of work by itself? Like what is required to bridge that gap between humans doing a manual process and handing it off to an agent?
Austin, you take this one.
Eval's observability and a really good discovery process.
I feel like that's exactly what I was anticipating you're going to say.
Start with eval. There's a new term that's kind of like materializing in the agent development space called eval-driven development. I think it like anchors itself in test-driven development. But when I have a process, I write an eval to assert that the LLM can perform that process appropriately before I even begin to make the LLM do it. And so there's a pre-step to that, which people, I think, underestimate, which is the discovery process and understanding what's actually happening. And I'm not a designer. I don't know very much about design, but design being the how things work versus like how things look. Design and product have a really, really, really clear place in helping development teams understand what the agent should be automating and what actions the agent should be performing. And I'm actually curious, like there's this exercise called jobs to be done. And that's about all I know about it, but it sounds like a pretty reasonable one. So what the hell's jobs to be done?
So jobs to be done can be defined as you hire things or products or services to do a job for you, right? You're hiring. One of the famous quotes or examples is people don't buy a 1/4-inch drill, they buy a 1/4-inch hole. And you can extend that quote basically saying that people want to buy that 1/4-inch hole so they can hang up a picture of something that they appreciate so they can live a better life, right?
It's a big hole for a picture.
That's a massive hole for a picture. Yeah, totally. That makes sense.
Use a big picture. But the whole concept here is like when you think of jobs to be done, it's a user hiring something to get a certain outcome, right? So what does that look like from an agent? Because an agent is like, you can probably I know we talked about tools. An agent is calling tools to accomplish certain goals, but does that fall into this jobs to be done format, right?
Yeah, so there's like a discovery process along the way. Before you can even write my point was before you can even write a good eval, you have to know what you're evaluating. Mm-hmm. And, like I know you're working on a project right now where you're dealing with customer service people handling, a very specific type of ticket, and understanding exactly what those customer service agents are doing, not just like the actions they're performing, logging into system A and system B and comparing documents, but like what are they looking at in those documents? Why do they skip over the first, page and a half of a PDF and only look at, the bottom of the second page because that's where all the information is? Like knowing those things is super important to building effective agents that work in production, because if you don't do those, the same reason a human skips the first page and a half is because it's confusing or useless. If I give that in context to an LLM, it's confusing and useless.
Right.
And so like there's really solid discovery process, understanding the jobs to be done, understanding the work being performed, building evaluations that mimic that work to be done. And then finally having observability over the agent to understand where and how that agent is actually performing in production. If I have a non-deterministic non-deterministic system and tool calling is only happening at 75% and I need it to be at 95% of like a certain type of query, like that's really important. And I need I need observability data in production to tell me what's happening, where my tools are not getting called, what is happening in a user query that's like preventing a tool from getting called or confusing the LLM. So then I can build eval and prompt to make sure the tool gets called at the appropriate times as often as possible. So like 3 things: discovery, eval, observability.
And Micah, I know you're a big observability guy. Like you're all about it. Talk to me a little bit about from kind of we know from a user perspective, user behavior, how that kind of fits in. But it seems like it might be even more critical, possibly for like an agentic experience to have that.
Yeah, totally. I like traditional software. I just want to be really clear. Observability in traditional software is a mess. It's garbage usually. People usually tack it on way after the fact. They feel that when you can release a feature or you ship something, it's running in production, we're good. I don't know how many teams I've worked with where observability has been added way down the line, way after the fact, way after they've had massive production incidents. In fact, almost always it starts because the business is like hemorrhaging cash or can't make their SLAs or they can't make their customers happy. And a lot of things that we introduce in observability is to combat that. So you can get away in traditional software like for a long time with pretty immature observability practices. That is the complete opposite in an agent.
Can you define observability? Because I think a lot of times like there's a disconnect between what observability is and what like logs and metrics are, and people don't get it. And I think especially in agentic development, like true Ollie, like observability is way more important than like logs and metrics.
Yeah. So I think a mistake that people make with observability, or at least understanding it, is that, in traditional software, you have an input and an expected output. That's usually where we harness like testing, right? Observability is the hypothesis is I understand the current state of my system by signals that it outputs. Right. And so it's a lot less about, expected input and output. And it's really applicable to a non-deterministic system because we actually don't know in an LLM how it's going to be treating the inputs in a lot of ways. It's a black box. So if you have a black box system, if you can pull signals out of it and observe those signals, it should give you a pretty good understanding of like the internal state of that system. And in an LLM, like that's the only way you can kind of understand what's happening. I do want to call out something you said, though. Like, so if we think about observability as that definition, the signals that we get are these traditional, like 3 golden signals, right? So you have metrics, you have logs, and then more importantly, for like traditional software, you have traces. So everybody knows the log. The log is like the old grandpa of like the telemetry signal, and they're usually hot garbage. Like it's not structured. They might have a timestamp. There's no cohesion on like the error code or anything like that, right? And modern observability has really struggled with logging because it's not structured and kind of not really well put together. Metrics as the second signal are way more kind of precise. You might get a range of numeric values or over like a histogram. They're great for like pattern detection over time, but teams tend to over rely on metrics as a signal of value. So like if I know that my CPU is heating up or if I know that my server is happy, like I don't actually know if my users are happy. Right. And then so that's when it goes into kind of this newer signal, which is tracing, where I can actually see through the steps and sequence of events where things are happening, the time it took. We can add specific attributes that add or derive business value from things. So if I have those 3 signals working together with tracing, I can answer questions like, how happy are my customers, right?
So when we think about LLMs then, and I think to like the conversation about what do we need, that observability data tells us how customers are using the system, what the inputs and outputs are. It's not as like, developer oriented as logs. One of our kind of nodes in the agent graph was getting like so big. The prompt was getting so big that we needed to break apart the prompt. And by having good eval, like it told us like, oh, we can like pull out this prompt, put it into a new node in the graph and, have this kind of two nodes doing two things rather than one node doing two things.
Yeah.
And actually observability data told us, like, as we pulled these, and the evals we wrote told us, like, as we pulled these things apart, we maintained similar levels of accuracy, or actually improved accuracy, but easier to work with.
I think there's one thing I want to say, though, to those three kind of pillars that Austin called out, like discovery, evals, observability. I think in the current state of the world, depending on your tools, evals plus observability they're almost tightly coupled together at the same time. I don't want to give the impression that you
Totally
stop doing evaluation and then move to observability.
Mm-hmm.
We have tooling now that allows you to kind of parallelize those, but they are just as critical.
Well, in the same vein, like, discovery happens continuously throughout the process. We've designed an offering that's really helpful for our customers that are trying to figure out how and where an agent could actually provide value, and if it will. And it's like, a few weeks of our design and engineering team coming in and saying, what is the human process? So what are the jobs to be done, and what are the technical systems that need to be integrated with, and can an LLM do that? And then if we are able to automate that, like, 80% that we talk about, and leave the final 20, is the value of an agent build, like, realized? Is there an ROI in that? And so a lot of our customers are front loading their agent builds with AI readiness and discoveries around the AI readiness, because it informs, where an agent could be effective. And actually often it's like, hey, we have 3 places, can we figure out one of these 3? Or we have, one place, but then our discovery realizes that it's actually more effective to put automation over here than in the original spot. And so that discovery informs how to start on your agent, but then it happens continuously as well throughout the project, because as you're automating, you're finding out, like, the little tribal knowledge that you don't really know about.
Right.
As, like, why is the agent being so formal when it sends an email response? Like, and that's getting a, increased denial rate for something. So we're going to, like, make it a little more human. So that stuff has to happen over time. And with AI agents, you end up testing a lot in production, and iterating a lot in production.
So I'm glad you called out the agent experience and, the discovery that happens up front. You get a clear picture of, before you invest all of this time and effort into building, like, a full agent, you get a pretty clear understanding of, okay, this is where the agent can fit, and this is the outcomes you can expect. And bridging that 80% gap, you have a pretty good understanding at the end of these couple of weeks that this is what an agent can do for you. From a user perspective, we can say, okay, the agent's going to take over this part of the job. Like, let's say they pull up a PDF and they have to scan the document and pull out, like, a subtotal, right? That's a manual process, and you can kind of look at that. How do you approach that from a developer perspective? Like, what are you looking at from a developer perspective to meet the human halfway through with an agent?
So there's a couple of really good techniques that happen during the agent build portion. So first, it always starts with eval. So, like, if I have a handful of PDFs and, I have a handful of subtotals that are supposed to come out, and my LLM is supposed to extract that as structured output, what I would do is I would create evals that ran those PDFs through a data extraction pipeline and pulled out that subtotal, and I would assert that my subtotal was correct every time, right? And then I can iterate with impunity over the rest of the structure of the agent and know that my subtotal extraction works correctly. That's where it starts. Mm-hmm. But there's other important parts that, like, are part of this, like, jobs to be done, or maybe it's not jobs to be done, but it's like that, like, asking a PM, there's that, like, exercise of, like, how do you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and there's, like, all the 10 things that need to happen. And we talked about it a little before, but, like, we need to have access to, the agent has to have access to the PDFs the same way that people do. Mm-hmm. The agent has to have access to the same systems, and there's different ways agents can integrate. An agent can integrate via an API, so a programmatic interface, and actually they can integrate via a UI, so a user interface, the exact same way a person would. And we use the agent discovery to decide what is the most efficient way to do that. And we build tools that are relatively deterministic in order to allow the agent to act like a person or do the same actions as a human user inside of these systems. So pulling up a PDF might be like, oh, I can get that out of an FTP server or a Dropbox or whatever. And so I don't need a UI to do that. I use an API. But then when I credit, a customer account for something, there is no API. So I need to log into my customer management portal and then, search for the customer's name or customer ID, pull them up, and then, add a credit to their account. And that's done via browser use.
I think it's really, 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 really super important to call that out. That is a extremely fundamental shift from how we think about anything with computers for like the, time immemorial. So the way you're working with this agent, you're providing it tools and skills and abilities to do things, and you're providing it access to things. And it's a lot like onboarding an employee, really. Right? Like they can do this, you have permission to do this, and you it's in the name, you give it some agency to make decisions. Like it is a really big shift in mentality. And I think, you need those evals, you need observability to actually realize that. But
well, in the same way, when you have so accountability always becomes a concern.
Right.
So like if Jill in customer service does something wrong, we can go talk to Jill, right? If an agent does something wrong, like where does accountability lie? And having observability as part of the production process, so you can see what the agent's been doing and you can see where it's doing the correct thing and it's doing the incorrect thing, allows you to go and fix that so that like accountability can lie within the agent.
Right.
If you don't have that observability, you lose that. The other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is human in the loop. So like we've talked a lot about like agents automate right now. The current capabilities of these language models, even the reasoning models and the agent graphs, is they automate somewhere right around 80% of like a common repetitive knowledge task.
Right.
And then there's often that final 20% where the juice isn't worth the squeeze. And so if I want to design and build an agent to that 80%, there's going to be human in the loop that reinforms the agent on what they could do. And there's actually techniques where I can automate 60% really easily. I have a human in the loop that has, long-term memory built into my agent cycle that helps the agent get better over time, so that the last 60 to 80% of automation actually is improved throughout the like working in production versus trying to like zero shot it out of the gate. And that gets you to a pretty valuable spot. One of the things I want to do, and we do with our AI readiness or agent experience 3-week thing that we were talking about, is making sure that these agents can return. It's like if I spend, months building out an agent that automates a process that only takes people a few minutes and, isn't exceptionally costly, the return on that investment is like likely never realized.
Right.
But if I have, a customer service, repetitive customer service task that takes 20 or 30 minutes and it's exceptionally repetitive and really costly, and I can automate that out so my CS people can handle something else, like maybe that ROI comes back in a matter of months, if not even in less than a year, then that's a really valuable use case for an agent. And then the other side of it is like automate tasks allows scale. So I can automate a task and I can scale the number of those tasks I'm doing with the same resource. So that's kind of where I think about it. And you can learn more about our AI readiness at focus.io/AI readiness.
Nice.
Software breaks. Great teams see it coming. At Focused, we build observability into everything we ship. You want better visibility into what's happening? Go to focus.io.
I want to talk about this really interesting article. I've never seen a use case like this. So there was this company, or this product called SoundSlice. What they do is they convert sheet music, pictures of sheet music, into digital sheet music that you can play online, edit, practice, right? They convert that. So product is pretty simple. You take pictures, upload it, whatever. So this article by Adrian, I hope I'm saying his last name right, Holavati, talked about, people were uploading screenshots of ChatGPT with ASCII tablature online, and it was basically ASCII characters with sheet music on it. And after some digging, what he found out was that ChatGPT was hallucinating a sound slice feature, saying that, hey, you could take this ASCII characters, put it into sound slice, and generate music this way. And their product team was like, that's kind of weird. Like, why is it?
Wait, they didn't support the ASCII tab.
No, this was not a feature. ChatGPT just made it up.
So they literally could not do what ChatGPT was saying. So
No.
just like ChatGPT is just lying.
It's literally.
Oh yeah, sorry, we call it hallucinating.
Yeah.
It's a nicer word than lying.
Yeah, just straight up just made it up. So now the product team has two options. They can either go onto the website and say, hey, you know what, we actually don't support this. ChatGPT might be lying to you. Oh, sorry, hallucinating.
Hallucinating
So-
at you.
So you could put that disclaimer on your website. Or what they did was they actually made the feature.
Did they make the feature with a coding agent?
I don't know about that, but they actually implemented this feature, so now you can actually upload ASCII characters into Sound Slice and kind of have that same feature. Which, what they call out is that this is probably the first time where a feature was generated or was prompted by AI. Super fascinating. I'd love to hear your take on it.
I think that is really cool. As a failed musician myself, I can only read tablature and not sheet music, so I would use that feature. It's really, really wild to think about. We've been talking about like this third user being able to address like interfacing developers and users with agents. Now, at a certain point, the business also has to be kind of accountable to agents and what they say, and they have to determine like, is this a good idea? And it seems like it's a pretty killer feature. One thing I think is really interesting too is, these hallucinations that these things generate are in a way kind of creative. Like not always just like how many R's and strawberries, right? But it's making up stuff like that it's probably aggregated some information about. And maybe it's got trained data on like, because lots of people have been asking me for this, maybe I should gently nudge you in the right direction. So I could see an agent pair for like product owners to kind of be able to spelunk these ideas.
Accountability of the agent. Agent invents a feature, makes it up, tells everybody that you have it. I think you're probably obligated as a product team to implement the feature unless it was like totally off the rails. But I don't know anything about Sound Slice, but it sounds like it's fairly in line with like the existing product. It's just like kind of a slightly different. And so if ChatGPT is a strong lead gen source, like if we saw ChatGPT driving a whole bunch of people to our website because, they were looking for a RAG course, and it told everybody that we had a RAG course and it was driving everybody to that RAG course, I would feel compelled almost to provide that because ChatGPT and the reference links are showing demand. The accountability of these things hallucinating is actually interesting. I mean, like there's the Canada Air thing too, where like the courts ruled that the AI customer support agent that made up customer policies, they ruled that Canada Air had to like honor what the AI agent said, even though the policies were completely made up. So like,
yeah.
I think using these things to inform, but like if you have them, especially customer facing, it's one of the reasons I like kind of back end ambient agents versus front end customer service. Or, we get a lot of calls for, build me an outbound sales bot.
It's just just like the travel one.
I mean, a lot of calls for outbound sales. Like I want to have my lead gen outbound sales be completely robotic. And honestly, it's a volume play, so it makes sense that like that's why people want it, and it tends to be fairly brutal of a job. But like, one, AI is not there, and two, there's a lot of variability inside of outbound sales that I think LLMs are not quite great at yet. And maybe they get there. There's startups that are trying to solve this problem and other stuff, but like, I think that these like back-end ambient agents that take over repetitive knowledge work like claims remediation or patent research or other things like that are way stronger, and they're helping inform and accelerate humans. And then the human in the loop helps catch these like hallucinations. But I think in some places you're just like, in that case, that product team made the right call. They implemented the feature, and I'm guessing I'd love a follow-up blog post from them saying like, how many signups did they get because of that? And like, if I just put like ChatGPT lied to you, go someplace else, I'm guessing they end with a lot of unhappy customers. So did it help their business to implement that? And likely, my guess is yeah.
So that was a happy accident, right? Like ChatGPT came up with a feature, they were able to implement it, that worked out. But the issue here, I think, is that you don't have control over what the LLM says because it's an external, just an LLM. Look, for the Air Canada example,
it was theirs.
It
Fair
was
enough.
theirs,
yeah.
right? So this is something that's completely out of your control, and it's just, I mean, okay, sure. So AI or ChatGPT can say Focus does RAG courses, right? That's still a more positive, sort of positive. I mean, if you take action on it and you catch it in time. But let's say you don't catch it, and ChatGPT is saying all sorts of strange things about Focus of what we don't do, right? If you don't catch it and people are talking about it, like that negatively affects your brand and kind of your offering, right?
I mean, yeah, this like LLM, I forget what they're calling it now. There's like LEO or Answer AEO, but like it's all these like having ChatGPT recommend you in the right way, or these LLMs, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, whatever, recommend you in the right way is like the new form of SEO. And it comes with like a substantial amount of authority, where like being in the top 3 on Google actually doesn't come with as much authority, because you're getting driven to a website where ChatGPT is like, here's what Focus is, here's what Focus does. You should hire them because they're experts in LangChain and agent development. And people are like, oh yeah, they are, like, because they trust these ChatGPT. So I could see if it's not saying the right things. I mean, I would think brand and marketing teams should be on top of like what these answer engines are saying about the brand, and then how to like drive authentic and organic content that creates like positive information and helpful information that can be summarized by an LLM and then fed back to a user when they ask the right questions. I would that's like the job now. Like if you were an SEO expert, that's you better be moving there. Google announced last quarter that they had, for the first time ever, a decrease in search traffic. And they're citing ChatGPT as a strong indicator of that. And so if Google search traffic is, for the first time ever, is falling, and instead people are going to these answer engines, that's where your brand needs to be thinking about how are these answer engines learning and representing me.
And it becomes even more critical to be more aware of how people are perceiving your brand, and that's where observability also comes into play, and how people are actually, or how users are interacting with your systems. If you don't know,
right,
you can act on it.
Yeah, I think but the infuriating thing in this standpoint though is like you're never gonna have the ability to track or understand how ChatGPT is making a decision on your brand. All you can do is try and seed it and like see what happens. So
it's the same as like you don't really know how or why Google is like recommending you first versus 15th. I mean,
I have heard a lot of people say that they can tell me that. I'm with you. I don't.
It's all made up.
It's like snake.
I mean, it's trial and error. Like SEO best practices. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff Google tells you need to do, right? Which are like your SEO best practices. But then there's a bunch of stuff that comes out of like, people trial and erroring and trying to kind of hack the algorithm,
right?
And the same will become true about these LLMs. And I mean, there's a natural evolution of them. But I would assume that like as people use them more and more as answer engines, and they become a bigger part of like the not just the nerdy people's lives, but like everybody's lives, there will be a way to build in like citation and reference even more, and people will learn how to check whether or not these answers are correct. It's why every RAG we build, has citation and reference built into it, because like if the LLM hallucinates, it can be catastrophic to a decision maker. And so like making sure that, and has grading and judgment built in too, but like those parts of a pipeline are exceptionally important. Howdy, y'all. Remember to love your craft. Evolution doesn't require chaos, and teams will always beat heroes.